Erik Menendez's wife, Tammi Menendez, has unleashed a scathing attack on the California Parole Board following their decision to deny her husband parole this week. In her words, the hearing was nothing more than a complete setup, a proceeding that she believes was designed from the very beginning to keep Erik behind bars, regardless of what was presented in his defense. Her outrage has lit up headlines and social media feeds, once again thrusting the infamous Menendez brothers into the spotlight decades after their parents' brutal murders shook Beverly Hills in 1989. On August 21, 2025, Erik Menendez, now 57 years old, faced the parole board for the first time since being resentenced earlier this year. In May, his punishment was shifted from life without parole to a sentence of 50 years to life, technically making him eligible for parole consideration. For the Menendez family, this was seen as a glimmer of hope, an opportunity for Erik to argue that after more than 3 decades in prison, he deserved a second chance at freedom. But instead of hope, what followed was bitter disappointment. The board ruled against him, delaying any possibility of release for at least 3 more years. Tammi Menendez, who married Erik in 1999 and has been one of his most vocal advocates ever since, did not hold back. She publicly blasted the ruling, claiming that Parole Commissioner Robert Barton had made up his mind before Erik even walked into the room. According to Tammi, Barton's questioning was aggressive, dismissive, and intentionally framed to highlight Erik's flaws rather than acknowledge any rehabilitation he may have achieved. She said, "It didn't matter what Erik said or did, this was decided before it even started. It was a setup." The parole board, however, presented a very different picture. They cited Erik's long list of disciplinary violations behind bars as proof that he remained unfit for release. Over the years, Erik has been written up for drug infractions, unauthorized cell phone possession, involvement in a prison gang-related tax scheme, and misuse of state computers. Even more damaging, according to the board, were violent incidents and what Barton described as a profound lack of empathy, particularly regarding his mother's murder. At the hearing, Barton pressed Erik on whether he truly felt remorse for killing Kitty Menendez, and his answers, at least in the commissioner's view, fell flat. The decision has deeply divided public opinion. Supporters of the Menendez brothers argue that their crime cannot be viewed in isolation, pointing back to the allegations of years of abuse at the hands of their father, José Menendez. Erik and Lyle have long maintained that their parents' reign of terror inside the household pushed them to the breaking point. Critics, however, see this as nothing more than a manipulative defense strategy, one that has been bolstered in recent years by documentaries, TikTok edits, and Netflix dramatizations that have cast the brothers in a more sympathetic light. Adding fuel to the fire, just one day after Erik's denial, his older brother Lyle faced his own parole hearing. On August 22, the board issued the same ruling, denied. Like Erik, Lyle was told he would not be eligible for reconsideration until at least 2028. For the family and supporters of the Menendez brothers, it was a devastating 1-2 punch. A message that the state of California has no intention of loosening its grip on the men who killed their parents in what remains one of the most sensational family murder cases in American history. But if the parole board thought their ruling would silence the Menendez family, they were wrong. Not only has Tammi spoken out, but Erik and Tammi's adopted daughter, Talia, has also voiced her outrage, saying the decision was unjust and that the family will continue to fight for Erik's release. She described the parole process as biased and broken, arguing that the board gave more weight to Erik's past mistakes in prison than to the decades of good behavior and rehabilitation efforts that he and Lyle have both displayed. This controversy also has a political backdrop. Earlier this year, Los Angeles County voters elected Nathan Hochman as district attorney, replacing George Gascon. Hochman has taken a much harder line against the Menendez brothers, rejecting their claims of abuse and pushing aggressively to keep them locked up. Gascon, on the other hand, had shown sympathy to the brothers' defense and supported resentencing under California's youth offender law reforms. The shift in leadership has had a massive impact on how the Menendez case is treated in courtrooms and parole hearings. Public reaction to the parole denial has been explosive. Some people online have rallied to Erik and Lyle's defense, arguing that more than 3 decades in prison is punishment enough. They point to the fact that both men were only in their late teens when the crime occurred, that they have spent the majority of their lives behind bars, and that rehabilitation, not perpetual punishment, should be the goal of the justice system. Others, however, are adamant that the brothers should never be released. They argue that the brutal shotgun murders of José and Kitty Menendez were premeditated acts of greed, carried out not because of fear but because the brothers wanted to inherit their parents' wealth and live a life of luxury. Adding to the drama, Commissioner Barton's comments have been dissected and criticized across social platforms. Many felt his tone during the hearing was unnecessarily combative, and Tammi's claims that the process was biased have only gained traction online. Some commentators have even suggested that the parole hearings felt more like a show trial, designed to send a public message rather than objectively evaluate Erik and Lyle's readiness for release. For now, the Menendez brothers remain where they have been since 1996, serving out their sentences in California prisons. But this is not the end of the story. Their family is already exploring the next steps, from filing legal appeals to seeking clemency from Governor Gavin Newsom. Tammi, in particular, has vowed to keep fighting, saying that she will not stop until her husband gets the fair shot at freedom she believes he deserves. And while the parole board may have closed the door for now, history has shown that the Menendez case has an uncanny ability to resurface, to find new life in the media, and to provoke passionate debate about justice, family trauma, and the very purpose of prison itself. What do you think? Are Erik and Lyle Menendez victims who deserve redemption, or murderers who should remain locked away for life? Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.